I'm Hannah Blackwood, a 58-year-old cavalry widow riding home across the Texas plains at sunset after 3 days at Fort Supply, when the sight below froze my breath. No cattle in the pastures, no smoke from the bunkhouse, only silence where life should be. Dread clawed at my chest. I spurred my mare toward the corral, dust stinging my eyes. Miguel stood there, hat in hand, the way a man stands at a grave. I ran inside. The stench of carbolic acid, fever, and death met me like a blow. My cowboy son William lay dying, skin wax-pale, bones sharp beneath the sheet. The doctor whispered, "Poisoning. Hours left. His wife hasn't answered." William's last words, "Mama, Pearl, barn." Then the monitor wailed. My son was gone. What would you do if betrayal stole your child's life? Have you ever faced injustice alone? Stay until the end to see how this cavalry widow turned grief into frontier justice. Comment your answer below. The sun hung low over the mesquite-dotted plains as I urged my mare Shiloh into an easy lope. Behind us, the pack mule carrying supplies from Fort Supply protested with a bray that echoed across the emptiness. 3 days I'd been gone, 3 days of riding the familiar route between my son's ranch and the fort where my late husband Jacob had served his final years. Old habits died hard. Even 5 years after burying Jacob, I still made the supply runs, still traded with the sutler who remembered when I'd followed my sergeant husband from post to post with a baby strapped to my back. That baby was a man now, 32 years old, owner of 5,000 acres of prime Texas cattle country, respected by white ranchers and Comanche alike. William Blackwood, named for his grandfather, built like his father, but with my mother's dark eyes and her gift for reading the land. He'd taken Jacob's small veteran's land grant and turned it into something that made my chest tight with pride every time I crested the ridge and saw the Blackwood Ranch spread below. The thought of him waiting, probably in the barn, working on that new corral he'd been planning, made me smile despite the saddle soreness. Fall roundup started next week. William had asked me to stay through October, help with the gather like I'd done every year since Jacob died. "Need your eye for the strays, Mama," he'd said, that crooked grin so like his father's it hurt. "And Miguel says nobody can cut a calf from the herd like you." Miguel Vasquez, our foreman, Jacob's friend, William's teacher, the vaquero, who'd taught my son everything about cattle that the army hadn't. Good man, loyal, the kind of man who'd stand with you when the Comanche raided, or when the bank came calling, or when your half-breed son needed someone to vouch for him in a town that didn't always welcome mixed blood. The land rolled beneath Shiloh's hooves, familiar as my own heartbeat. 30 years I'd ridden these plains, first following Jacob's cavalry unit, then visiting William's ranch after we'd settled here. I knew every draw, every creek, every stand of cottonwoods. Knew where the Comanche camped in summer, where the cattle sheltered in winter storms, where William had scattered his father's ashes on the highest point of the ranch so Jacob could keep watch over his boy. My mother's people thought I was foolish marrying a white cavalry sergeant. My father's people thought I was a traitor bearing a soldier's child. But Jacob had loved me, truly loved me, not as a curiosity or a conquest, but as Hannah. And he'd raised William to be proud of both his heritages, to speak Comanche as fluently as English, to understand that strength came from bridging worlds, not choosing sides. William had inherited that bridge-building gift. His ranch employed Mexican vaqueros, German immigrants, even a Chinese cook who'd fled the railroad camps. The Comanche traded horses with him, trusted him. White ranchers respected his cattle and his word. He'd married a year ago a pretty thing named Pearl who'd come to town from somewhere back east. I'd had my doubts about her, about how quickly William had courted her, about the way her eyes calculated when she looked at the ranch. But my son had been lonely after Jacob died, and I'd bitten my tongue. A man needed a wife. A ranch needed a woman's touch. I'd been wrong to stay silent. I knew that now, though I couldn't have said why. The sun painted the sky orange and gold as I topped the final rise. Below the Blackwood Ranch, spread across the valley, the house Jacob had built with his own hands, the barn William had raised after his first profitable cattle drive, the corrals and bunkhouse, and the windmill that pumped water for the stock tanks. Home. But something was wrong. The near pasture stood empty, no cattle grazing, no horses in the corral. No smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney, though the hands should have been starting supper. The ranch yard, usually alive with activity at this hour, sat silent as a graveyard. And there by the corral stood Miguel, alone, his hat in his hands, the way a man stands at a grave. My heels touched Shiloh's flanks, and she leaped forward, sensing my sudden urgency. The pack mule's lead rope jerked tight, but I didn't slow. The wrongness I'd felt all afternoon crystallized into certainty, cold and sharp as a blade between my ribs. Something had happened to William, and as Shiloh's hooves thundered across the last quarter mile, I saw Miguel's face, saw the grief carved into every weathered line, and knew with terrible clarity that I was too late. Whatever had gone wrong, I hadn't been here to stop it. Have you ever felt that something terrible was about to happen but arrived too late to stop it? That crushing weight of, if only I'd come home sooner. Stay with me. What I found inside that house would shatter everything I thought I knew about my son's marriage. I didn't wait for Miguel to speak. The look on his weathered face told me everything I needed to know and nothing I wanted to hear. I swung down from Shiloh before she'd fully stopped my boots hitting the dust hard enough to send up a small cloud. Senora Hannah. Miguel's voice cracked on my name. In 15 years, I'd never heard him sound like that, broken, helpless. Don William he is. The doctor, she says. He couldn't finish. Didn't need to. I was already running toward the house. The front door stood open, and the smell hit me before I crossed the threshold, the sharp tang of carbolic acid, the sickly sweet odor of fever sweat, and underneath it all, something worse. The smell of death, waiting in the shadows. My cavalry wife's nose knew that smell. I'd breathed it in field hospitals from Virginia to the frontier, had held Jacob's hand while it filled our bedroom 5 years ago. William. His name tore from my throat. In here, Mrs. Blackwood. A woman's voice, calm and professional, came from William's bedroom. Dr. Abigail Reed stepped into the hallway, wiping her hands on a cloth-stained rust brown. She was one of the few women physicians on the frontier trained back east before her husband died, and she'd fled west to start over. William had mentioned her treating ranch hands, delivering babies for the Mexican families. I'd never thought I'd need her for my son. How bad? I asked, though I already knew. You don't call a doctor to stand vigil unless hope is gone. Dr. Reed's gray eyes held mine. I'm sorry. If I'd seen him sooner, perhaps. But the symptoms came on fast. Too fast. By the time Mr. Vasquez rode for me 3 days ago, the damage was done. 3 days. I'd been 3 days away buying tobacco and coffee at Fort Supply while my son and I pushed past her into the bedroom. The curtains were drawn against the afternoon sun, leaving the room dim and close. In the bed Jacob and I had given William when he built this house, my son lay dying. That truth hit me like a rifle butt to the chest. The big, strong man who could rope a steer and gentle a wild horse who'd lifted me clear off the ground in a bear hug just a month ago, he looked like a ghost already. His skin had gone the color of old wax stretched tight over bones that seemed to have sharpened overnight. Dark circles hollowed his eyes, and his breathing came shallow and labored. Mama. His voice was barely a whisper, but his eyes opened. Those dark eyes that mirrored my mother's, that had looked at the world with such hope and trust. You came back. Of course I came back. I knelt beside the bed, taking his hand. It felt like bird bones wrapped in paper-thin skin burning with fever. What happened, son? What's wrong? Dr. Reed spoke from the doorway. Poisoning symptoms, violent illness, rapid deterioration of the organs. I've seen it before, bad water, spoiled food, sometimes deliberate, but I can't determine the source, and it's too late to purge his system. I've given him laudanum for the pain. That's all I can do now. Hours, Mrs. Blackwood. Perhaps a day, if he's strong. Hours. The word echoed in my skull like a death drum. William's fingers tightened weakly around mine. Mama, need to tell you. He struggled to focus, his eyes drifting. Pearl, she's not what? Shh, save your strength. But even as I said it, something cold slithered down my spine. Pearl, his wife of barely a year. Where is Pearl William? San Antonio. Dr. Reed answered when William couldn't. Shopping trip according to the note she left. I sent word 3 days ago. No response. Shopping. While her husband lay dying. William's grip tightened with sudden desperate strength. Mama, listen. Hidden. In the barn. Loft. Under the loose board where... His breath rattled. Where I used to hide Pa's tobacco. Find it. Promise me. I promise. I smoothed the damp hair back from his forehead the way I'd done when he was small and fevered. I promise, son. But you rest now. Save your strength. His eyes closed, but not before I saw the fear in them. Not fear of dying. William had his father's courage, fear of something else, something that had to do with Pearl and whatever he'd hidden in the barn loft, something he'd known might get him killed. What kind of wife doesn't answer when her husband is dying? That question burned in my mind as I watched William take his last breath. Where was Pearl really? And why did my son use his final moments to warn me about her instead of saying goodbye? The answers waiting in that barn would reveal a betrayal darker than I could imagine. William died as the sun set, painting the western sky the color of blood and gold. He went peaceful in the end, the laudanum taking him gently into that final darkness. His last word was, "Sorry, Mama," an apology I didn't understand and couldn't bear to hear. I held his hand until it went cold, until Dr. Reed gently touched my shoulder and said what we both already knew. My son was gone. I should have wept, should have fallen apart the way I had when they brought Jacob's body back from the Apache ambush, but something hard and cold had settled in my chest where grief should have been. Grief would come later. Right now, I needed answers. Dr. Reed left after preparing William's body, promising to send the undertaker in the morning. I walked her to the door, my movements mechanical, and found Miguel waiting on the porch. He'd been there the whole time, keeping vigil like the loyal friend he was. "Señora," his voice was rough with unshed tears. "I am sorry. Don William, he was like a son to me also." "I know, Miguel." I touched his shoulder, and the gesture seemed to break something in him. "There is something I must tell you. Something I should have told Don William, but He twisted his hat in his hands. "I did not want to speak ill of his wife, but now, with him gone, you should know. Señora Pearl, she has been seen in town. At the saloons." My hand tightened on the porch rail. "Gambling. See, Big Kate's place mostly, poker faro, spending money like water flows. The vaqueros, they talk. They say she loses more than she wins, but she keeps playing, using Don William's name for credit." His eyes met mine, dark with shame. I should have told him, but he seemed so happy with her, and I thought perhaps the men exaggerated. You know how cowboys gossip. "You were trying to protect him," but the information settled into place like a puzzle piece I'd been missing. Pearl gambling. Pearl in San Antonio while William died. Pearl, who'd married my son after knowing him barely 6 months. The sound of a wagon interrupted us. Martha Schneider, our nearest neighbor, climbed down with the heavy grace of a woman who'd borne 6 children and buried 3. She carried a covered dish, the frontier custom, bringing food for the bereaved. "Hannah." She pulled me into a fierce hug that smelled of lye soap and bread dough. Miguel sent word. "I'm so sorry about William. Such a good boy he was." "Thank you, Martha." I took the dish, though I couldn't imagine eating. Martha's sharp blue eyes studied my face. "There's something you should know about that wife of his." She glanced at Miguel, who nodded encouragement. 3 weeks back, I saw her loading trunks onto a wagon. Big trunks, like she was packing to leave. When I asked if she was taking a trip, she got all flustered, said she was just rearranging things. "But, Hannah?" Martha's weathered hand gripped mine. "A woman knows when another woman is preparing to run." The cold thing in my chest grew colder. "Thank you for telling me." After Martha left, I lit a lantern and walked to the barn. The loft ladder creaked under my weight. It had creaked the same way when William was a boy, sneaking up here to smoke the tobacco he'd stolen from Jacob's pouch. I'd caught him once, tanned his hide good, but he'd kept using this hiding spot for treasures he didn't want found. The loose board was where I remembered third from the wall. It came up easy, revealing a shallow space beneath. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, the kind drummers sold for keeping accounts. I carried it down to the tack room, set the lantern on the workbench, and opened to the first page. William's neat handwriting filled the lines, dates, amounts, notes. My hands began to shake as I read. March 15th. Pearl says she needs $200 for a new dress for the Cattlemen's Association dance. Withdrew from ranch account. April 3rd. Pearl took $500 to San Antonio, says her sister is sick. I didn't know she had a sister. April 20th. Miguel mentioned seeing Pearl at Big Kate's saloon. When I asked her, she said she was just having a lemonade with some ladies. But Big Kate doesn't serve lemonade. Page after page, the same pattern. Money disappearing. Pearl's lies growing bolder. William's trust eroding into suspicion. And then 2 weeks ago, the final entry that made my blood run cold, September 10th, confronted Pearl about the land deed I found in her trunk. She'd forged my signature, used the ranch as collateral for gambling debts. She laughed, said I should have read what I signed at the bank last month. That wasn't a withdrawal slip. It was a loan agreement. If something happens to me, Pearl is not who she claims. Name in her letters, Jack Dalton. God help me, I married a devil's accomplice. Jack Dalton. I didn't know the name, but I knew the type. Land grabbers, conmen, the vultures who circled wounded ranches waiting for the kill. And my son had known, had suspected, had tried to protect what Jacob built and what he'd grown, but he hadn't known they'd kill him for it. I rode into Esperanza at first light, William's journal wrapped in oilcloth and tucked in my saddlebag. The town was waking smoke rising from chimneys, the blacksmith's hammer already ringing, a stray dog nosing through the alley behind the mercantile. 15 years I'd been riding this street, and it had never looked more foreign. Everything had changed, even if the buildings hadn't. Sheriff Tom Bridger was pouring coffee when I walked into his office. He took one look at my face and set down the pot. Hannah, I heard about William. I'm sorry. He'd been a Texas Ranger before settling here, had known Jacob had watched William grow up. His sympathy was genuine, but I hadn't come for condolences. I need your help, Tom. I laid the journal on his desk. My son was murdered. His weathered face went still. That's a serious accusation. Read it. He did, his expression darkening with each page. When he finished, he closed the journal carefully and looked at me with something like pity. Hannah, I believe you. I believe Pearl Blackwood is a thief and probably worse. But believing and proving are different things, especially when it comes to a man's wife. She forged his signature, stole thousands, used the ranch as collateral for gambling debts. In a marriage, property is complicated. A wife has rights to her husband's assets. Without William here to testify that he didn't authorize these transactions, Tom spread his hands helplessly. And even if we could prove theft, she's his legal widow now. She inherits everything unless there's a will saying otherwise. The words hit like stones. So she can steal his ranch, maybe poison him for it, and walk away free? I didn't say that. Tom's jaw tightened. I said the law ties my hands, but there are other ways to fight. You need a lawyer, Hannah. A good one. I need Samuel Chen. Tom's eyebrows rose. The Chinaman. You sure about that? Some folks in town won't like it. Some folks in town can go to hell. Samuel is the best lawyer within 100 miles, and you know it. A ghost of a smile crossed Tom's face. That he is, and he owes William a debt, if I recall. That business with the railroad men last year, I remembered. 3 railroad workers had tried to run Samuel out of town, said they didn't want Celestials practicing law in a white man's court. William had stood with Samuel, backed him with fists when words failed. The railroad men had left on the next stage, and Samuel had stayed. Samuel Chen's office was above the land office, a single room with law books stacked on every surface. He stood when I entered, his dark eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Mrs. Blackwood, I heard about William. Please accept my condolences. His English was perfect, educated back east before prejudice had driven him west. How may I help you? I need you to keep Pearl from stealing my son's ranch. I laid out everything, the journal, Miguel's testimony, Martha's observations. Samuel listened without interrupting, making notes in a precise hand. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. The legal challenges are significant, he said finally, as William's widow Pearl has substantial claims. But if we can prove the marriage was entered under false pretenses, we may be able to contest her inheritance rights. He looked up. I will help you, Mrs. Blackwood. William stood with me when others wouldn't. I will stand with you now. I can pay. He held up a hand. We will discuss payment after we win. First, we need to see what the bank knows. Josiah Morton had run the Esperanza Bank for 20 years, had held the Blackwood accounts since Jacob first deposited his cavalry pay. His face was grim as he pulled the ledgers. I was afraid you'd come asking, Hannah. I should have contacted you sooner, but I kept hoping. He shook his head. $8,000 withdrawn in the past 6 months, most of it in the last 2 months. 8,000. 2 years of hard profit gone. Show me the withdrawal slips, Samuel said. Josiah produced them, William's signature on each one, but even I could see the forgeries, the letters too careful, the spacing wrong. Samuel examined them through a magnifying glass, making notes. These are clearly forged. Any handwriting expert could testify to that. He looked at Josiah. Did Mr. Blackwood have a safe deposit box? He did. Opened it about 2 months ago, put some papers inside. Said he wanted them kept safe. Josiah hesitated. His wife has a key too. She came by last week, said she needed to get something. I couldn't refuse her, she's his widow. My stomach dropped. What did she take? I don't know. Bank policy, we don't look in the boxes. But Josiah's face said he regretted that policy now. Can we see what's left? Samuel asked. The box was nearly empty. Just a few papers, the original ranch deed, William's discharge papers from the militia, and 3 letters tied with string. Samuel's hands were steady as he untied them, but mine shook as I read over his shoulder. They were from Pearl to someone named Jack. The first 2 discussed the Blackwood job, when to move, how much the ranch was worth, where to hide the money. But the 3rd letter, dated just 3 weeks ago, made my blood turn to ice. Jack. The old woman returns next week. Don't worry about her. She's just a half-breed cavalry widow. No one listens to squaws. Once William's gone, she'll have no claim. 3 other Texas ranches already secured. Blackwood is the biggest prize yet. The fool signed everything I put in front of him. Samuel's face had gone hard as stone. When he looked at me, I saw rage burning behind his careful control, the rage of a man who knew too well what it meant to be dismissed, to be considered less than human because of blood or birth. Mrs. Blackwood, he said quietly, they have made a fatal error. They underestimated you. He was right. Pearl had no idea what a half-breed cavalry widow could do when her son's blood cried for justice. She'd spent her life using people, manipulating them, counting on their prejudices and assumptions to blind them. But I'd spent 30 years surviving on the frontier, bridging 2 worlds, reading men's intentions in their eyes and their silences. I'd tracked Apache raiders across desert that killed white soldiers. I'd negotiated with Comanche war chiefs and cavalry colonels. I'd buried a husband and raised a son in a land that wanted to break us both. Pearl thought my blood made me weak. She was about to learn it made me dangerous. Big Kate's saloon didn't open until noon, but I walked through the door at dawn anyway. Respectable women didn't enter saloons. Half-breed women had even less business there. But I'd stopped caring about respectability the moment Pearl called me a squaw. The main room smelled of stale beer and sawdust. Big Kate stood behind the bar polishing glasses, her hand near the shotgun she kept underneath. We're closed. She looked up and stopped. Hannah Blackwood. Heard about William. I'm sorry. I need information about Pearl. Kate's expression hardened. She poured 2 whiskeys without asking. That one. I should have thrown her out the first time she walked in. Pearl showed up 18 months ago, said she was from Abilene. But I've run saloons 20 years. I know a dance hall girl when I see one. Dance hall. St. Louis, Kansas City, one of those circuit towns. She started gambling here a year ago. Lost more than she won, but never worried about money. Last few months, she got bolder, bragging about coming into property soon, how she'd landed a big fish. Kate's disgust was evident. There was a man with her sometimes. Fancy dresser, smooth talker. Called himself Jack. They'd meet in the corner, talk quiet. Professional con artists, both of them. I thanked Kate and rode northwest toward the Comanche reservation. The land roughened as I traveled territory the army had given the Comanche after the wars. The camp sat in a valley near a year-round creek tipis mixed with wooden cabins. An old woman looked up as I approached. Nadua, I called in Comanche. It is Hannah, daughter of Keeps the Fire woman. Nadua rose, her weathered face breaking into a smile. Hannah, who walks between, you come with a heavy heart. We sat by her fire and I told her everything in our mother tongue. When I finished, she was quiet, then said, I warned him. What? 3 moons passed, your son came to trade horses. I saw the woman with him, yellow hair, dead eyes. I told William, that one walks with a death shadow. She sees only things to take. He thanked me, but love made him blind. My throat tightened. He should have listened. Perhaps, but it is not finished. The dead-eyed woman rides with a smooth-talking devil. 3 men watch your ranch now, 2 in the hills, 1 in town watching the sheriff. The smooth talker came yesterday on a black horse with white feet. I stared at her. How do you know? Nadua's smile was grim. The people see much. Your son was kind to us, gave us beef, traded fairly, spoke our language with respect. When he married that woman, I sent word to watch. My grandson has been tracking them 2 weeks. They plan something soon, Nadua continued. She retrieved a small leather pouch from her tipi. Take this. It carries your mother's medicine protection for those who walk between worlds. I took the pouch, feeling herbs and stones inside. Thank you, sister. The people stand with you, Hannah, who walks between. When you need us, we will come. As I rode back toward the ranch, the sun painted the sky blood and gold. Behind me, I carried the support of two worlds. Ahead, Pearl and her gang waited confident in their victory. They thought my blood made me weak. They were about to learn that walking between worlds meant I could fight in both, and I'd learn to fight from people who'd survived everything the frontier could throw at them. Pearl had underestimated a mother's love and a warrior's resolve. Now she'd pay for it. Pearl returned 3 days after William's death, riding up to the ranch like she owned it, which legally she might. She sat a horse well, I'd give her that. Beside her rode a man I'd never seen before but recognized instantly from Kate's description. Tall, broad-shouldered with a gun belt worn low and comfortable. Cutter Hayes, I'd learn later. Jack Dalton's enforcer. I was on the porch when they arrived. Miguel standing beside me with his rifle leaned casual against the rail, not pointing at anyone, just there. Pearl dismounted with practiced grace, her black morning dress spotless despite the dusty ride. Her face was composed in an expression of grief that would have fooled anyone who hadn't read William's journal. Hannah. She approached with hands outstretched as if we were family who'd comfort each other. I came as soon as I got word about poor William. The telegram only reached me yesterday in San Antonio. I've been devastated. Have you? I didn't move from the porch, didn't take her hands. Her smile faltered for just a moment. Of course. He was my husband. I loved him. Funny way of showing it, gambling at Big Kate's while he lay dying. The mask cracked. Pearl's hands dropped, her expression shifting from grief to calculation in a heartbeat. Behind her, Cutter Hayes shifted his weight hand, drifting toward his gun. I don't know what lies you've been told, Pearl said, her voice cooling. But I'm William's legal widow. Everything he owned is mine now. This ranch, the cattle, the accounts, all of it. Is that so? I kept my voice level, though my hand itched for the Colt revolver tucked in my waistband, including the $8,000 you stole, the forged signatures, the gambling debts you used his ranch to cover. Pearl's eyes narrowed. You've been busy, but it doesn't matter what you think you know. The law is on my side. I'm his wife. You're a con artist who married my son to steal his ranch. I stepped forward and Miguel moved with me. I know about Jack Dalton. I know about the other ranches. I know what you are. For a moment, something like respect flickered across Pearl's face. Then it hardened into cold contempt. You're smarter than Jack said you'd be, but smart doesn't change the law. This ranch is mine. Cutter Hayes stepped forward, his hand now resting openly on his gun. Mrs. Blackwood, you're trespassing on Mrs. Pearl's property. You've got 48 hours to pack your things and clear out. After that, we'll remove you ourselves. We? I asked quietly. Me and whoever Mrs. Pearl needs to make sure her legal rights are protected. His meaning was clear violence if necessary. Miguel's hand tightened on his rifle. Senora Hannah is not going anywhere. This ranch belonged to Don Jacob, then to Don William. It does not belong to some puta who, watch your mouth, Mexican. Cutter's voice dropped dangerously. You're just hired help. You'll leave when she does, or you'll leave in a pine box. Enough. Pearl's voice cut through the tension. She turned to me and I saw the truth of her, then no grief, no pretense, just cold ambition. You have 48 hours, Hannah. Be reasonable. Take whatever personal items you want and go. There's no point fighting this. The law says I'm William's widow. The bank will honor my claims. The sheriff can't help you, I checked. You're just a half-breed cavalry widow with no legal standing. There it was. The slur she'd written in her letter now spoke into my face. You think my blood makes me weak? I said softly. You think because I'm half Comanche, I'll just roll over and let you steal my son's ranch? I think you're practical enough to know when you're beaten. Pearl smiled, confident. We've done this before, Hannah. 3 other ranches, 3 other families who thought they could fight. They all lost. The law is very clear about widows' rights, and I'm very good at using the law. She wasn't just confident, she was experienced. This gang had perfected their system. 48 hours, Pearl repeated. She mounted her horse with easy grace. After that, Cutter and his friends will help you pack, and they're not gentle. As they rode away, I saw them 2 more riders on the ridge watching, waiting. The gang had positioned themselves confident that intimidation and legal pressure would be enough. Miguel appeared at my elbow, rifle still in hand. Senora, this is war now. I nodded, watching Pearl disappear down the road. Then we'd better get our army together, Miguel. Because I'm not losing Williams Ranch to that devil woman. But even as I said it, I saw the scope of what we faced. Pearl had the law, had armed men, had experience with this exact situation. She'd done this before and won every time. She just didn't know she'd finally picked the wrong family to destroy. By evening, the ranch house was crowded with allies. Sheriff Tom Bridger sat at the head of the table, Samuel Chen beside him with law books. Miguel and his vaqueros stood by the door. Martha and Klaus Schneider, Tommy Bridger, and Reverend Isaiah Stone filled the remaining chairs. This was my army. Pearl gave me 48 hours to leave, I said. I'm not leaving, but I need your help. Tom spoke first. Hannah, I'll be straight. Pearl's legal claim is strong, as William's widow Texas law gives her substantial property rights. Without a will saying otherwise, she inherits everything. Which is why we attack on two fronts, legal and practical. Samuel opened a law book. I've been researching the marriage certificate. There's something wrong with it. Every head turned. Pearl signed as Pearl Dalton, not Pearl McKenna, her real name, according to Big Kate. If she married William under a false identity, the marriage may be invalid. Can you prove it? I asked. I've sent telegrams to county clerks in Kansas and Missouri. If we can establish she used multiple identities for fraud, we can invalidate the marriage. But it'll take days longer than her 48-hour deadline, which is why the community needs to stand firm, Martha said. Make it clear that removing Hannah by force has consequences. Reverend Stone pulled a folded paper from his Bible, his hands shaking. I should have come forward sooner. 2 weeks before William died, he asked me to witness a new will. He discovered Pearl's lies. He handed me the document. This is properly witnessed and notarized. My hands trembled reading William's handwriting. He left the ranch to me, established the scholarship trust, and specified Pearl would receive only the legal minimum. He knew, I whispered. He tried to protect us. Does this hold up? Tom asked Samuel. If properly witnessed and notarized, yes. Dr. Reed can testify William was of sound mind. Pearl's claim just got much weaker. She won't accept it without a fight, Klaus Schneider rumbled. That woman has men with guns. You won't have to start a range war. Nadua stepped from the doorway, 2 young Comanche men behind her. The people will watch. If the devil's men come with violence, you will know before they arrive. I embraced her. Thank you, sister. William was kind to the people. We do not forget. She addressed the room. 3 men watch this ranch, 2 in the hills, 1 in town. The smooth talker with the black horse stays at the hotel. They think they are hunters. They do not know they are also hunted. So, here's our plan, Samuel said. Legal challenge to the marriage, William's will as backup community defense if they try violence. We fight in court, not on the ranch. And if Jack Dalton's wanted in other territories, Tom added, I can bring in federal marshals. That changes everything. The planning continued guard rotation's legal strategy, how to protect the ranch from intimidation. The faces around my table, white, Mexican, German, Chinese, Comanche, represented everything the frontier could be when people chose community over division. Pearl had counted on me being alone. She'd miscalculated badly. Hoofbeats thundered outside. Tommy Bridger burst through the door, breathless. Pa Jack Dalton himself just rode into town. Fancy suit, drinking with Cutter Hayes at the hotel? His face was pale. He's telling everyone he's coming here tomorrow at noon to settle accounts with Mrs. Blackwood. The room went silent. Tomorrow at noon. The showdown was set. Then we'll be ready, I said quietly. All of us. They came at noon, exactly 5 riders led by Jack Dalton on his black horse with white feet. Pearl rode beside him in a blood-red dress, Cutter Hayes and 2 hard-faced men flanking them. They entered my ranch yard like conquerors. But I wasn't alone. I stood on the porch with Sheriff Bridger and Miguel. Behind us, the community had gathered Samuel Chen with law books, Big Kate, Dr. Reed, Josiah Morton with bank ledgers, Reverend Stone Martha, and Klaus Schneider Tommy and the ranch hands. Near the barn, Nadua and her Comanche trackers watched from the shadows. Jack Dalton dismounted with practiced grace, silver-haired, expensive suit, cold eyes behind a gentleman's smile. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm Jack Dalton, Mrs. Pearl's associate. There's been unpleasantness about property rights. Let's resolve this peacefully. Peacefully, I said. Like you did at 3 other Texas ranches. His smile didn't falter. Mrs. Pearl is William's legal widow. This ranch is hers. "You're trespassing." "Strong claim," Sheriff Bridger said. "Can you prove it's legal? Can you prove it's not?" "We can." I nodded to Big Kate. She stepped forward. "I run a saloon. Pearl came in 18 months ago, claimed she was a rancher's daughter, but I know a dance hall girl when I see one. She gambled heavy, ran up debts, bragged about landing a big fish and coming into property soon." "Hearsay," Jack said smoothly. Josiah Morton opened his ledger. $8,000 withdrawn from William's accounts. Every signature forged. I have experts who'll testify. Plus, a loan against the ranch with a forged signature. "William gave me access," Pearl said, her voice tight. Dr. Reed stepped forward. "I treated William in his final days. The symptoms were consistent with poisoning, rapid deterioration, organ failure. Someone tampered with his medicine." "Serious accusation," Jack said, voice hardening. "Can you prove it?" A figure moved from the barn shadows, Nadua walking with Comanche elder dignity. The gang shifted nervously. "3 moons passed. I warned William about this woman," Nadua said in clear English. "I told him she walked with a death shadow. The people have watched since then. We know where you sleep, Jack Dalton. We know your 3 watchers. We know your black horse with white feet." She smiled without warmth. "You are not invisible." Jack's composure cracked slightly. He hadn't known about the surveillance. "Indian superstitions," he recovered. "This proves nothing." "This does." Samuel Chen stepped forward with papers. Pearl signed the marriage certificate as Pearl Dalton, but county records show her real name is Pearl McKenna, wanted in Missouri for fraud. A marriage under false identity has no legal standing in Texas. Pearl went white. "That's a lie." And even if valid, Samuel continued producing another document. William executed a new will 2 weeks before death, witnessed by Reverend Stone. He left this ranch to Hannah Blackwood. You get only the legal minimum, which given your debts is nothing. "No," Pearl's voice rose shrill. "Jack, you said this would work. You said the law was on our side." "Shut up, Pearl," Jack hissed, but Pearl was past control. "You promised this would be easy. You said the half-breed wouldn't fight. This was supposed to be like the others, 7 ranches. Jack 7. "Shut your mouth." Jack's hand moved toward his gun. Cutter Hayes drew on Miguel. The vaquero moved like lightning rifle barrel up and around, cracking Cutter's wrist. The gun fell. Miguel's rifle pointed at Cutter's chest. "Don't," Miguel said softly. The other gang members froze. Ranch hands appeared from the bunkhouse, all armed. They were outnumbered. "Jack Dalton," Sheriff Bridger drew his pistol. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted theft." "You can't prove anything," Jack said, but his smoothness was gone. "We just did," I said, "in front of witnesses." Pearl screamed at me, tears cutting through dust on her face. "You think this is over? There are others. The operation is bigger than Jack's 7 ranches we've taken. You can't stop all of us." 7 ranches, Tom Bridger repeated grimly. "Federal case. Marshals will want to talk about that." As Tom's deputies moved to bind the gang, Pearl turned to me one last time, her face twisted with rage. "You were supposed to be weak, just a half-breed widow nobody would listen to. How did you—" "You made every fool's mistake," I cut her off. "You thought my blood made me weak. You didn't understand that walking between 2 worlds made me twice as strong. You never imagined my son's kindness had built bridges you couldn't burn." Pearl had no answer. As Tom led her away in irons, she twisted back. "They'll come for you. The others, they'll—" But the threat was empty. She'd lost. The crowd dispersed Big Kate to town Dr. Reed, promising her medical report, Josiah planning fund recovery. Miguel checked the ranch hands. Nadua and her trackers melted toward the reservation. Samuel approached, a rare smile on his face. "That went well." "Thanks to all of you," I said. William chose his friends wisely. "The ranch is yours, Hannah, legally and completely." As the sun descended, I stood alone on the porch my husband built and my son had grown. Pearl had tried to steal it through lies. She'd failed because she'd underestimated everyone who'd loved William. Justice was served. The ranch was safe. But Pearl's final threat about the larger conspiracy echoed. This battle was won, but the war might not be over. For now, though, it was enough. The town council hearing 3 days later was swift. Council President Holt read the findings with gravity. Based on evidence presented, the marriage between William Blackwood and Pearl Dalton is declared invalid, entered under fraudulent pretenses using a false identity. William Blackwood's last will and testament is upheld. The Blackwood Ranch passes to Hannah Blackwood, his mother and sole heir. Pearl, seated in irons, said nothing. The fight had gone out of her. Pearl McKenna, Jack Dalton, and associates are sentenced to 15 to 20 years in territorial prison for fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The gavel fell. Justice was served. Marshal Crawford, a lean man with iron-gray hair, approached after. "Mrs. Blackwood, I've been tracking Dalton's operation for 2 years. Your evidence broke it wide open. 7 ranches targeted across Texas, 4 stolen, 3 saved, including yours. We're working on property recovery. You did more than save your ranch. You helped stop a criminal enterprise." It should have felt like complete victory, but all I could think was that William should have been here to see it. We buried my son on a hill overlooking the ranch beside his father. The whole community came, the same diverse faces who'd stood with me at the showdown, plus neighbors from miles around. Reverend Stone spoke simply. William Blackwood was a bridge builder. Born of 2 worlds, he honored both. He treated all men fairly. He built a ranch that stood for community, for the idea that we're stronger together than divided. When he finished, people looked to me. Standing beside my son's grave, the words came. William dreamed of a frontier where heritage didn't divide us. He lived that dream every day. Pearl tried to destroy what he built. She failed because William's kindness created something she couldn't understand: a community that stands together. That's his legacy. Miguel stepped forward. Don William taught me that a man's worth is his word and his work, not his birth. I will honor his memory by protecting what he loved. Others spoke: Martha, Big Kate, Tommy, each sharing moments of William's kindness. Nadua spoke in Comanche, then English, about how William honored the people when others dismissed them. As we lowered William into the Texas earth, grief joined with pride and determination. What he'd built would endure. At the land office, Samuel and I signed the papers. The Blackwood Ranch was officially mine. "What will you do now?" Samuel asked. "Run the ranch. Miguel will be co-manager. Tommy gets a permanent position. We'll keep doing what William started, running an honest operation that treats people fairly." He'd be proud. That evening, Nadua approached me alone, her face serious. "Hannah there is a child, Comanche and white like William was. Her parents were killed by raiders. She has no family. The people cannot keep her. There is not enough food. She is 9 winters old. Her name is Little Dove, but the missionary calls her Sarah." My heart clenched. Another mixed-blood child, orphaned, caught between worlds with nowhere to belong. I knew what William would have wanted. "Bring her to me," I said. Nadua brought Little Dove the next morning. The child was small for 9 years, thin from reservation hunger, with dark eyes that held too much knowledge of loss. Comanche and white, caught between worlds, just as William had been. "Little Dove," I said in Comanche, kneeling to her level, "you are welcome here." She studied me with ancient eyes. "You are the kind cowboy's mother. Nadua says you have horses." Despite everything, I smiled. "Many horses. Would you like to see them?" Hope flickered across her face. I gave her William's childhood room. She touched his things carefully: the wooden horse Jacob had carved, the books. This was his room. Yes, and he would want you to have it. That evening we sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky gold and crimson. I told her about William, about Jacob, about the ranch built by people who honored both heritages. "Miguel will teach you to ride," I said, "just like he taught William." "Can I stay?" she asked quietly. "Even though I'm half Comanche," I pulled her close. "Especially because you're half Comanche. This ranch needs someone who understands both worlds." The next morning, I found her watching Miguel work the horses. He lifted her onto the fence rail, beginning the lessons William had once learned. Martha arrived with bread. Big Kate sent a doll. Tommy brought a child-sized rope. The community welcomed this orphan child into our frontier family. Standing on the porch, watching Little Dove laugh as Miguel showed her the reins, I felt William's presence like warm sunlight. Pearl had tried to steal his ranch, but she couldn't touch his real legacy: the bridges he'd built, the kindness he'd shown. The Blackwood Ranch would stand, not just as land and cattle, but as proof that love and community could defeat greed and hatred. Little Dove would grow strong here, carrying forward the legacy of a cowboy who believed heritage was something to honor, not hide. That was frontier justice. And somewhere, William was smiling.